Look at this. The Omega is eating from the trash bin. The words sliced through the staff break room like a blade. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, the cold pasta suddenly transforming into rocks lodging in my throat. My fingers trembled against the ceramic plate, knuckles going white from the pressure. This wasn't garbage. This was just leftover food from the lunch service. The kind the kitchen would toss at the end of the shift anyway. But Hana didn't see it that way. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed over her designer blouse, perfectly manicured nails drumming against her elbow. Her expression was one of pure disgust, like she'd discovered something rotten festering in a corner. Seriously, Alex? You can't even afford to buy yourself a proper meal? This is what happens when you're an Omega. Always scavenging from other people's plates like some kind of stray. My scent shifted before I could stop it. That bitter, burnt sugar smell that Omegas release when humiliation sets in, when shame becomes a physical thing crawling under your skin. I hated that my biology betrayed me like this. Advertising my emotional state to everyone with a functioning nose. I shoved the plate away, my appetite vanishing as mortification coiled around my spine like ice water spreading through my veins. It's not trash, I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. The head chef mentioned that staff members could help themselves to. The chef? Hana's laugh was sharp and brittle, designed to cut. That chef sees you as a charity project, Alex. Otherwise, why would anyone hire an Omega to work in a prestigious hotel kitchen? You should be grateful you even have this job. Most places wouldn't take the risk. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. Wanted to disappear into nothing, to cease existing in this moment where everyone in the break room had gone silent. All eyes fixed on the spectacle of my humiliation. Then the kitchen door burst open. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly, becoming thick and charged with something primal. Alpha pheromones flooded the space like a storm front rolling in from the ocean. Commanding, powerful, impossible to ignore. My Omega instincts responded immediately, my body going rigid, my breathing becoming shallow. Hana's smug expression crumbled. She turned around slowly. He stood in the doorway like he owned it, which I would later learn he literally did. Tall enough that he had to duck slightly under the doorframe, with shoulders broad enough to fill the space. His dark hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, pushed back from a face that could have been carved from marble. The chef's coat he wore was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the strong column of his throat. But it was his eyes that caught me, silver blue and currently burning with a quiet fury that made my stomach perform complicated acrobatics. What exactly is happening here? His voice was low and controlled, but I could hear the dangerous edge underneath, like thunder rumbling in the distance. Hana straightened immediately, her entire demeanor shifting as she tried to salvage the situation. Her voice went saccharine sweet. Oh, Chef Mitchell. I was just what? He stepped further into the room, his gaze flickering to the abandoned plate in front of me before returning to her face. Just harassing my staff? Just engaging in workplace bullying? Which one were you going for? I wasn't, Hana stammered, her confidence fracturing. I was only trying to what? Trying to shame someone for eating leftovers? Mitchell's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. That's not leftover food. That's a trial dish I specifically asked Alex to taste test for the new menu. I needed his feedback on the seasoning balance. My heart stuttered in my chest. Wait. What? Hana blinked rapidly, clearly thrown off balance. But, I assume your assumptions were incorrect, Mitchell interrupted, his tone dropping several degrees into Arctic territory. And if you believe you can treat any member of my staff this way, Omega, Beta, or Alpha, then you've fundamentally misunderstood what kind of establishment this is. He leaned forward slightly, his presence becoming even more overwhelming. People who create hostile work environments don't belong here. The color drained from Hana's face, leaving her looking pale and shaken. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for oxygen. No words came out. Finally, she turned on her expensive heels and fled from the room, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the frames on the walls. The silence that followed felt suffocating, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. Mitchell released a long, controlled exhale, then turned his attention to me. His expression softened incrementally, though his eyes remained intense. Are you all right? I managed a nod, even though my throat felt like someone had wrapped barbed wire around it. He moved closer, then crouched down beside my chair, bringing himself to my eye level. His scent washed over me, cedar wood and dark coffee, with undertones of something warm and spicy I couldn't identify. It wrapped around me like a blanket. And despite everything that had just happened, my omega instincts practically purred with contentment. "Alex," he said quietly, his voice gentler now, "if anyone ever speaks to you like that again, if anyone makes you feel less than what you are, you need to tell me immediately. Do you understand?" I met his gaze and found myself drowning in those silver blue depths. Something passed between us in that moment. Something electric and undefinable that made my breath catch in my lungs. "I will protect you," Mitchell murmured, the words sounding like a vow, and against all logic, against every self-preservation instinct I'd developed over years of being treated as lesser, I believed him. The other staff members in the break room had started moving again, conversations resuming in hushed whispers, but I couldn't look away from Mitchell, couldn't break the connection that seemed to tether us together in this strange, suspended moment. He stood up slowly, breaking eye contact first. "Finish your meal. It would be a waste of good pasta if you don't." The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "And for what it's worth, the seasoning actually is a bit off. Too much salt, not enough acid to balance it. I'd appreciate your honest opinion." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the kitchen and leaving me sitting there with my heart racing and my mind spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. I looked down at the plate of pasta still sitting abandoned in front of me. Slowly, I pulled it back toward myself and picked up my fork. It did have too much salt, but somehow that didn't matter anymore. I stayed late that night, long after the dinner service had ended and most of the staff had gone home. The incident with Hana kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. Mitchell's defense, his lie about the trial dish, the intensity in his eyes when he'd promised to protect me. I was in my tiny locker room changing out of my kitchen uniform when someone knocked on the door. "Alex? May I come in?" Mitchell's voice. My pulse immediately kicked into high gear. I opened the door to find him standing there, still wearing his chef's coat but looking exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Like he'd spent hours wrestling with thoughts that wouldn't let him rest. "You're still here?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Just organizing some inventory records." I lied. The truth was that I'd been afraid to go home, afraid to be alone with my thoughts and the lingering shame from earlier. Mitchell looked at me with an expression that suggested he could see straight through my excuse. We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment before I couldn't hold back the question burning in my chest. "Why did you cover for me earlier?" He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossing over his chest. "I didn't cover for you." "Yes, you did." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "That wasn't a trial dish. That was leftover chicken Alfredo from table 9. I know because I helped plate it during the lunch rush." Mitchell went very still. For several long seconds he didn't move, didn't speak. Then slowly he straightened up and met my gaze directly. "You knew. I work here. I know the difference between a trial dish and yesterday's pasta special." He ran his hand through his hair, messing it up even more. I'd noticed he did this when he was frustrated or thinking hard about something. "Then why didn't you correct me?" "In front of Hana?" "Because..." I trailed off, struggling to articulate the complicated mix of emotions. "Because I was humiliated. Because I didn't want to make the situation worse. Because I've learned that sometimes it's easier to accept small kindnesses than to fight battles you can't win. Because it didn't seem important. It's important to me." The weight in those 4 words made something twist in my chest. I looked away, focusing on the scratched metal surface of my locker. "You didn't need to defend me. I could have handled it myself." "Handled it?" Mitchell's tone sharpened. "She was degrading you, Alex. She was using your designation as a weapon to make you feel worthless. You think I could just stand there and let that happen? You're the head chef." I countered, forcing myself to meet his eyes again. "You're not my personal bodyguard. Honestly, you don't need to get involved in my problems." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or frustration. He pushed away from the doorframe and closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. Suddenly he was right there, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that my omega instinct screamed conflicting messages. Submit, flee, get closer, run away. "Do you even know who I am?" His voice dropped to a rough, low register that sent shivers down my spine. I blinked, confused by the question. You're Chef Mitchell. Head chef. You've been working here for 3 years, you have an irrational hatred of cilantro, and you take your coffee black with 2 sugars despite telling everyone you drink it plain. I own this hotel, Alex. The world tilted sideways. I stared at him, my brain refusing to process what he'd just said. What? This hotel. This kitchen. Everything you see. He gestured vaguely around us, but his gaze never left mine. I built it. I own it. And I hired you because you're talented, not because I felt sorry for you. My mouth had gone completely dry. You're lying. I'm not. Mitchell reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a sleek black card, the type I'd only seen carried by the investors who occasionally toured the property. He held it up for me to see. Embossed in gold lettering. Mitchell Vale, proprietor, the Azure Crown Hotel. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything except stare at that card like it might suddenly reveal itself as an elaborate forgery. Why didn't you tell anyone? I finally managed to whisper. Because I wanted to actually work without the politics. Without people changing how they treated me because of what I own rather than who I am. He tucked the card back into his pocket. But Hana crossed a line today, and now she's going to face the consequences. You're going to fire her? Already did. Called her 20 minutes ago. My eyes widened. Mitch, she disrespected you. She created a hostile environment for my staff. His jaw clenched. If I allow people like that to stay, what kind of leader does that make me? What kind of alpha? The sincerity in his voice hit me like a physical force. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to reconcile the quiet, focused chef I'd worked alongside for months, with this powerful alpha standing in front of me now, protective, commanding, and apparently wealthy enough to own an entire hotel. Mine? Some primal part of my brain whispered, no, not mine. Could never be mine. I should go, I said quietly, grabbing my bag from the locker. Alex, wait, but I was already moving, pushing past him and out the door. His scent clung to my clothes, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. I needed space, needed air, needed to think. I made it to the employee exit before I had to stop and lean against the wall. My hands shaking. Mitchell Vale owned the hotel. Had owned it the entire time I'd worked here. Had watched me struggle and work late nights and deal with people like Hana, all while keeping this massive secret. And he'd fired someone for disrespecting me, protected me when he had no obligation to do so, promised to keep protecting me. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to sort through the chaos of emotions swirling in my chest. Confusion, gratitude, fear, and underneath it all, something warm and dangerous that I refused to examine too closely. Tomorrow I would have to face him again. Would have to work alongside him knowing what I knew now. Tomorrow felt impossibly far away and terrifyingly close at the same time. I successfully avoided Mitchell for exactly 2 days. I switched my shifts, adjusted my timing, took my breaks in different locations, anything to prevent us from being in the same space at the same time. It was childish and I knew it, but I couldn't process what had happened. Couldn't reconcile the revelation that he owned everything with the way he'd looked at me in that locker room. On the 3rd day, my body betrayed me. I was walking home from work when the first cramp hit. Mild at first, barely noticeable. I ignored it. Then the second one came, sharper and more insistent. And then my skin started to feel like it was on fire, that familiar, terrible warmth spreading through my limbs. No, no, no. Please not now. I collapsed against the brick wall of a closed boutique, my legs giving out as another wave hit. My scent spiraled completely out of control. Sweet, thick, desperate. The unmistakable scent of an omega in heat. My suppressants. I'd missed doses. 2, maybe 3. I'd been so focused on avoiding Mitchell that I'd completely forgotten my medication schedule. Another cramp doubled me over and I bit down hard on my lip to keep from crying out. Heavy footsteps approached, running. Alex. Of course. Of all the people in this city, of course it had to be him. Mitchell skidded to a halt in front of me, his eyes going wide as my heat scent hit him full force. I watched his pupils dilate, watched his hands curl into tight fists at his haze like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for me. You're in heat, he said, his voice strained and rough. Brilliant deduction, I panted, trying and failing to stand up. Just leave. I'll be fine. You're not fine. He crouched down, and when his hand touched my shoulder, electricity shot through my entire nervous system. He jerked back immediately. Damn it. Sorry, I shouldn't. Another cramp tore through me, and this time I couldn't stop the whimper that escaped. Mitchell's expression turned agonized. Alex, I need to get you somewhere safe. You can't be out here like this. Any alpha passing by I know what could happen. I cut him off, shame burning hotter than the heat itself. I knew exactly what I looked like, what I smelled like. An unmated omega in heat, alone on an off-street. I was basically advertising my vulnerability to every predator in a 5-block radius. Mitchell stood abruptly and shrugged off his jacket, draping it over my shoulders. His scent enveloped me. Cedar wood, coffee, alpha, and my omega side keened with need. Wanting more, wanting him more. My apartment is 3 blocks from here, he said, his voice tight with control. I'm taking you there. You'll be safe. I won't touch you. I give you my word. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him I'd rather suffer alone than let him see me like this. Weak, needy, pathetic. But another wave of heat rolled through me, and I couldn't form words. He picked me up effortlessly, cradling me against his chest, and I let him. The walk to his apartment passed in a blur of pain and his scent and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my ear. He kept murmuring reassurances that I couldn't quite process. His voice a low rumble that somehow made the cramps more bearable. His apartment was nothing like I'd imagined. Sleek and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city skyline. The furniture looked expensive but comfortable, and the kitchen was surprisingly bare for someone who cooked professionally. He set me down carefully on a charcoal gray couch, making sure not to let his hands linger. The bathroom is down that hallway. There's also a nest room, a guest room designed for omegas. My sister uses it when she visits. I blinked up at him, my brain struggling to focus through the heat haze. You have a nest room? My sister is an omega. I had it built for her. He was already moving toward the kitchen, putting distance between us. I'll get you water and painkillers, and I'll call Dr. Marin. She can bring suppressants. Mitchell, I'm not leaving you alone like this, Alex. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. But I won't take advantage of your condition. I promise you that. Something cracked open in my chest at the sincerity in his words. He disappeared into the kitchen while I sat there trembling, fighting against every instinct screaming at me to follow him, to beg him to come back, to ask him to stay close. Here, I jumped. He was back, holding out a glass of water and 2 white pills. Painkillers. They should help with the worst of the cramping. I took them, and when our fingers brushed, he inhaled sharply and stepped back like I'd burned him. Mitchell, I whispered. Why are you doing this for me? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and the intensity in his gaze stole what little breath I had left. Because you deserve better than how the world has treated you, Alex. He said quietly, and I want to be the one who gives you that. Before I could formulate a response, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Dr. Marin is stuck in emergency surgery. She can't get here until tomorrow morning. My heart sank. A full night. In heat. Alone in an apartment with an unmated alpha. This was going to be torture for both of us. I'll stay in my bedroom, Mitchell said quickly, already backing toward the hallway. Door locked. You'll be completely safe. But as he turned to leave, my hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. The contact sent sparks racing up my arm. He froze completely, every muscle in his body going rigid. Stay, I breathed. Please. I watched his careful control shatter in his eyes. Watched him struggle between what he wanted and what he thought was right. Alex, you don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. My voice was steadier than I expected. I'm asking you to stay in the room with me. Just don't leave me alone. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt charged, heavy with possibility and danger, and something neither of us wanted to name. Finally, Mitchell nodded slowly. Okay, but I stay on the opposite side of the room. And if you change your mind, even for a second, you tell me. Agreed? Agreed. He helped me to the nest room, and true to his word, he settled himself against the far wall while I burrowed into the blankets that smelled faintly of lavender and vanilla. His sister's scent, probably. The night was going to be long. But at least I wouldn't face it alone. Alex, you can't ask me to do that. Mitchell's voice sounded destroyed, fractured at the edges. His entire body had gone rigid the moment my fingers wrapped around his wrist, and I could feel his pulse hammering wildly beneath my touch. His scent had changed too, darker now, heavier, carrying undertones of possession that made my omega instincts sing even through the haze of heat. I'm not asking for anything inappropriate, I managed to say, though my own voice trembled. Just stay here, in this room. I don't want to be alone right now. His eyes squeezed shut, and I watched his jaw clench so hard that I worried about his teeth. Do you understand how dangerous this is? I understand perfectly. And I did. I knew exactly what I was asking of him. Knew that requesting an unmated alpha to remain in close quarters with an omega in heat was reckless beyond measure. Potentially catastrophic for both of us. But somewhere in the chaos of pain and fear and vulnerability, I'd discovered something unexpected. I trusted him completely. Mitchell released a long, shaking breath before nodding once. All right. But I maintained distance. Far side of the room, no exceptions. And if you become uncomfortable for even a moment, you have to tell me. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. He guided me into the nest room with careful hands that never lingered too long on my skin. The space was everything my omega instincts craved: soft blankets in various textures, an abundance of pillows, lighting that could be dimmed to almost nothing. I burrowed into the center of it all, pulling his jacket tighter around my shoulders because his scent provided the only real comfort I could find. Mitchell positioned himself against the opposite wall, drawing his knees up and tilting his head back. The physical distance between us couldn't have been more than 8 feet, but it might as well have been an ocean. Silence expanded to fill the space, heavy and electric. Talk to me about something, I whispered eventually. Anything. I need distraction. He opened one eye to look at me. What kind of something? Whatever you want to share. A long pause stretched before he spoke again. The hotel exists because of my mother. That surprised me enough to momentarily override the heat coursing through my system. Tell me about her. She was an incredible chef. Possibly the most talented person I've ever watched work in a kitchen. His voice took on a distant quality, like he was looking at memories from very far away. But she was also omega, and the hospitality industry treated her abominably. They underpaid her consistently, overworked her without mercy. When she finally tried to open her own establishment, every investor vanished the moment they discovered her designation. My chest ached with sympathy that had nothing to do with heat cramps. Mitchell, she never got to see her dream realized. A heart attack took her before that could happen. All that accumulated stress and disappointment. He met my gaze then, and the raw vulnerability in his expression made breathing difficult. So I created this place for her. I made absolutely certain that every single staff member receives fair compensation and respectful treatment, regardless of their designation. Nobody should endure what she did. Tears were sliding down my face before I even registered their presence. She would be incredibly proud of what you've built. I hope you're right. The small, sad smile crossed his features. When I hired you, your resume wasn't particularly impressive. You lacked formal culinary training. But listening to you discuss food, talk creating dishes that make people feel safe and valued, you reminded me so much of her. I tasted salt on my lips and realized I was crying harder now. Alex. Mitchell started to rise, then caught himself, his fists clenching against the floor. God, I desperately want to hold you right now. Then do it. I can't. You're in heat. I don't care about that. I pushed myself upright, letting the blankets fall away despite the tremors still running through my body. Mitchell, I've spent my entire existence being told I'm either much or not enough. That being omega makes me weak, makes me lesser, makes me something shameful. But you've never once made me feel that way. That's because you're not weak, he said with fierce conviction, his voice cracking slightly. You're genuinely the strongest person I've ever encountered. The distance between us vanished. I couldn't say who moved first, perhaps we both did simultaneously. But suddenly he was right there, arms encircling me with exquisite care, drawing me against his chest while I fell apart. I sobbed into his shirt while he held me steady, one hand cradling the back of my head protectively, the other pressed firmly against my spine like an anchor keeping me grounded. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. You're completely safe. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I actually believed those words. We remained like that while my heat continued burning under my skin. Still present but somehow more bearable with Mitchell's solid presence surrounding me. Eventually the sobs subsided into hiccups, then into quiet breathing. Sleep never came. Instead, we talked about everything imaginable and nothing particularly important. He told me about growing up in a household that valued cooking above almost everything else. I shared stories about the pack that had expelled me immediately after my presentation as Omega. He described his favorite dishes to create and why each one mattered. I confessed my secret dream of eventually opening a small bakery where Omegas could work without facing judgment or discrimination. He showed me the scar marking his left hand, a kitchen accident at 16 involving a knife that slipped while his attention wandered. I pointed out the star-shaped birthmark on my shoulder blade, though I firmly established he wasn't allowed to actually see it, which earned me his quiet laughter. Exhaustion began creeping in at the edges. I found myself curled against his side, his arm a warm weight around me, both of us staring upward at the ceiling while city lights filtered through the curtains. Alex, after your heat ends, would you let me take you to dinner? I turned my head to study his face. Are you asking me on a proper date? Yes, I am. He met my gaze without flinching, though vulnerability was written clearly in his expression. My heart performed some complicated acrobatics in my chest. You realize people will gossip mercilessly. The owner dating staff, an alpha with an omega. They'll claim I manipulated my way into favoritism. Let them say whatever they want. Mitchell, I genuinely don't care what anyone thinks. His fingers laced carefully with mine. I've spent 3 years maintaining distance because I thought it was the professional thing to do. But honestly, screw professional standards. I want you, Alex, and if you'll give me the chance, I'll dedicate every single day to proving I'm worthy of you. I kissed him. The action wasn't planned or driven by heat desperation. It simply felt right. His lips were soft and careful against mine, like he feared I might shatter or regret the decision. When I finally pulled back, his eyes had gone wide with wonder, as though he couldn't quite believe what had just occurred. Yes, I whispered. Dinner sounds perfect, but you're doing the cooking. He laughed, genuine and bright, the sound transforming his entire face while making my omega practically radiate happiness. Absolutely, Dr. Marin's heat suppressants worked with remarkable speed. Within 2 hours of taking them, my temperature had normalized, the cramping had completely faded, and my scent had mellowed from desperate omega in heat to something manageable and controlled. But even as my body settled into equilibrium, I could feel the weight of reality pressing down on my shoulders. Mitchell had remained through the entire night, had held me while I cried, had made promises I wasn't sure either of us could keep, and now the world beyond his apartment door was waiting with teeth bared. Dr. Marin departed with a knowing smile and strict instructions about maintaining a regular suppressant schedule. Mitchell prepared actual breakfast. Eggs cooked to perfection, toast with real butter, fresh squeezed orange juice, and we ate in companionable silence until my phone began its insistent buzzing. 11 missed calls. 23 unread messages, every single one from Easton. Hell, I muttered, opening the message thread. Alex, where are you? People are saying you disappeared with Mitchell last night. Alex, answer your phone. Okay, now I'm genuinely worried. Are you alive? If you're dead, I'm going to resurrect you. Just to kill you myself. I typed quickly. I'm fine. Currently at Mitchell's place. We'll explain everything later. The response came instantaneously. You're where? The chef, Mitchell? Alex, call me immediately. Sighing, I pressed dial. Easton answered before the first ring finished. You spent the entire night with him. During your heat? Easton's voice hit a pitch that made Mitchell glance up from his coffee with eyebrows raised. Alex, have you completely lost your mind? Nothing happened. He was completely respectful. He did. I don't care what didn't happen. Do you have any idea what people are already saying? Because trust me, they're talking. My stomach dropped like a stone. What do you mean they're talking? Hana posted about it. Ice flooded my veins. Posted what exactly? Everything. On the hotel's internal staff forum. She's claiming you seduced the owner to secure your position. That you deliberately faked going into heat to trap him. Easton's voice softened with concern. Alex, it's catastrophic. People are commenting everywhere, sharing screenshots. This has spread way beyond the hotel. I collapsed onto Mitchell's couch, the room tilting sideways. That's impossible. She doesn't even work there anymore. How could she? Either someone gave her access credentials, or she never returned her login information. I honestly don't know. Easton paused. Listen, I know Mitchell terminated her employment, but her family has serious connections. They own at least half the restaurant suppliers in this entire city. She can make this situation extremely ugly if she chooses. After ending the call, I buried my face in my hands, trying to breathe through the panic clawing up my throat. The couch cushion dipped as Mitchell sat beside me, close but maintaining respectful distance. What happened? I explained everything with a shaking voice. Hana's malicious post. The rumors metastasizing across the internet. The comments from strangers who'd never met me tearing apart my character and credibility. His expression darkened progressively with each word. The coffee mug struck the counter with a sharp sound, and his scent transformed into something thunderous, dark, furious, barely controlled alpha rage. She did what? Mitchell. It doesn't matter. We can just ignore. Absolutely not. He already had his phone out, dialing rapidly. This is slander. Defamation of character. I'm handling this immediately. How exactly? Fear crept into my question. He looked at me with eyes like tempered steel. Press conference. This afternoon. I'm making everything public. My stomach plummeted. Public? Mitchell, no. That will only make things exponentially worse. People need to hear the truth. That I own this hotel. That I terminated her for creating a hostile work environment. That you did absolutely nothing wrong. He crossed the room, cupping my face gently between his palms. Alex, I promised to protect you. This is that moment. Let me do this. But your privacy, your anonymity, means nothing compared to you. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. You're what matters. Only you. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Mitchell's public relations team moved with impressive efficiency, dispatching notices to local media outlets, business publications, and industry blogs. Within 3 hours, the hotel's main conference room had transformed into organized chaos. Reporters packed every available space, camera flashes creating artificial lightning, microphones extended toward the podium where Mitchell stood wearing a tailored suit instead of his customary chef's coat. I remained backstage, watching everything unfold on a monitor, my hands trembling so violently I had to clasp them together. Easton had materialized the moment I called, now standing beside me radiating protective concern. He's actually doing this, Easton whispered with awe. Yes. I breathed. He really is. Good afternoon. Mitchell's voice cut through the ambient noise with calm authority. I'm Mitchell Vale, owner and founder of the Azure Crown Hotel. I'm here to address allegations made by a former employee and clarify certain misconceptions about my role here. Murmurs rippled outward through the assembled reporters. Camera flashes intensified. Many of you recognize me as Chef Mitchell, head chef of this establishment. What you may not know is that I'm also the sole proprietor. I've maintained this privacy for personal reasons. I wanted to work without the political complications that accompany being identified as ownership. He paused deliberately. However, recent circumstances have necessitated this disclosure. A reporter's hand shot up. Mr. Vale, which circumstances specifically? 3 days ago, I terminated Hana Winters for workplace harassments. Specifically for deliberately targeting a staff member based on their Omega designation and creating an actively hostile work environment. His voice hardened perceptibly. The allegations she's currently circulating online are demonstrably false and will be addressed through legal channels. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Another reporter called out, Mr. Vale, can you confirm a romantic relationship with the Omega she mentioned? My breath caught painfully. Mitchell didn't hesitate even fractionally. Yes, I can confirm that. Chaos exploded, cameras flashing like strobes, questions shouted over each other in competing waves. However, he continued, voice rising to cut through the noise, our relationship began after the heat incident she referenced, which occurred entirely off hotel property. It has zero bearing on his employment status or position. Alex Hayes is exceptionally talented and earned his role through genuine skill and dedication, not manipulation or favoritism. Someone else. Doesn't dating staff create inherent conflicts of interest? It would, Mitchell responded evenly, if I served as his direct supervisor. But I don't. Alex reports to the kitchen manager, not to me personally. I formally recused myself from any decisions regarding his employment, performance evaluations, or advancement opportunities to maintain complete transparency. He'd anticipated every possible angle of attack. One final point. Mitchell leaned toward the microphone, his gaze penetrating through the camera lenses. This hotel was established on foundational principles of fairness, respect, and equal opportunity regardless of designation. Anyone, whether employee, supplier, or investor, who engages in discrimination or harassment will not be tolerated. Miss Winters is the first person I've removed for violating these principles. She won't be the last. Stepping back from the podium, he ignored the explosion of questions and waving hands. He walked straight off stage, straight to me. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, finding my hand. I nodded, throat too constricted for speech. "Good," he squeezed gently. "'Cause we still have that dinner date, and I never break my promises." Despite everything, the cameras, the chaos, the lingering fear, I smiled. Our first official date happened 3 days later, after the initial media frenzy had subsided into manageable background noise. Mitchell selected a small rooftop bistro that neither of us had visited previously, distant from the hotel, removed from press attention, away from anyone who might recognize us and transform a private moment into tomorrow's headline. Just us. "Finally, order anything you want," Mitchell said, passing me the leather-bound menu with a gentle smile. I scanned the options before glancing up with deliberate mischief. "Including the lobster?" "Especially the lobster. No budget restrictions tonight." I ordered it partially from defiance and partially because I'd never actually tasted lobster in my entire life. He requested steak prepared medium rare. We shared an expensive wine whose name I completely butchered, requiring the waiter's tactful correction, which made both of us laugh. "You know," I said while twirling pasta around my fork, 7 days ago I was eating abandoned leftovers in a storage closet, avoiding people like Hana. Now I'm having lobster with a millionaire hotel. Life takes strange turns." Mitchell's smile was soft and genuine. "You deserve lobster every single day, Alex. You deserve everything good this world can offer. You're being overly dramatic." "I'm being completely sincere." He reached across the white tablecloth, taking my hand like it was something infinitely precious. "Alex, I recognize this week has been overwhelming. The press conference, the ongoing gossip, people staring whenever we appear together, all of it. But I need you to understand something. I regret nothing. Not one single moment." My heart performed complicated gymnastics. "Not even the part where I sobbed all over your shirt for 3 consecutive hours? Especially that part." His thumb traced slow, deliberate circles on my palm. "You allowed me to see the real you, not the carefully constructed version you show the world for survival purposes. Not the protective mask you wear to appear smaller and less threatening. The authentic you." That meant everything to me. I blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in such a public setting. "You're going to ruin my makeup, and I actually made an effort tonight." He laughed quietly, the sound wrapping around me like physical comfort. "Then I'll restrain myself. For now." We finished our meal slowly, savoring each bite and every shared moment. Afterward, we wandered through the rooftop garden while city lights glittered below us like terrestrial stars, cool night air pleasant against my skin. "Alex?" Mitchell stopped walking, turning to face me directly. "Yes, I understand this is early. I know we're still navigating what we are to each other, what this relationship means." He hesitated, clearly choosing words with surgical precision. "But I want you to know something important. I'm completely committed. Whatever this becomes, wherever it leads us, I'm with you. Entirely." I looked up at this alpha who'd defended me when nobody else would, who'd protected me from harm, who'd witnessed every damaged piece of my soul and chosen to stay anyway. Something shifted into place inside my chest, clicking like a lock finding its key. "I'm completely committed too," I whispered. He kissed me then, slow and deep and achingly sweet. I tasted possibility and promise on his lips. 3 months passed. Hana's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice by a judge who found her claims baseless. She lost numerous supplier contracts when word spread about her harassment behavior and subsequent defamation attempts. According to recent reports, she'd relocated to another state entirely, attempting to rebuild where her reputation hadn't preceded her. I received a promotion to sous chef. Mitchell insisted it had nothing to do with our relationship, and he was correct. I'd earned the position through dedication, through countless late nights perfecting techniques. Through proving my abilities repeatedly, we moved in together officially. His apartment transformed into our shared space. The nest room became my personal sanctuary, and he commissioned custom shelving for my expanding cookbook collection and the various kitchen gadgets I kept acquiring. People still talked occasionally, still whispered when we entered work together, still exchanged meaningful glances at industry functions, still questioned whether I'd genuinely earned my position or received it through favoritism. But their opinions had stopped mattering, because every morning I woke beside an alpha who loved me unconditionally, who saw every aspect of me, omega, chef, survivor, dreamer, and chose me repeatedly. "Hey," Mitchell murmured one morning, drawing me closer in our shared bed. "What are you thinking about?" I smiled against his chest, breathing in his familiar cedarwood scent, "Just contemplating how fortunate I am." "I'm the fortunate one. You chose me when you had absolutely no obligation to do so, and perhaps we were both fortunate. Perhaps that's the fundamental nature of love. Two people selecting each other consciously, every single day, regardless of external opinions or judgments. Two people constructing something genuine and lasting from chaos." I used to believe being omega made me weak, made me lesser, made me something requiring concealment. But loving Mitchell, and permitting him to love me without fear or reservation, revealed the truth. It made me unstoppable. The world had tried breaking me with shame and discrimination and cruelty, had attempted convincing me that my designation meant I deserved less, meant I should accept whatever scraps others deemed appropriate. But Mitchell had shown me something different, had demonstrated that being omega didn't diminish my worth. It was simply one facet of who I was. My strength came from surviving despite everything working against me. My value came from the kindness I maintained despite experiencing so much unkindness. My power came from choosing vulnerability with someone worthy of that trust. "I love you," I said quietly, the words emerging naturally for the first time. Mitchell went very still. Then he tilted my face upward, his silver blue eyes searching mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "I love you too, Alex, more than I have words to express." And in that moment, everything felt possible. The hotel continued thriving. Mitchell implemented new policies protecting staff from discrimination, establishing the Azure Crown as an industry leader in equitable treatment regardless of designation. Other establishments began following our example, slowly shifting cultural norms. My bakery dream started taking concrete shape. Mitchell helped me develop business plans, introduced me to potential investors who actually respected omega entrepreneurs. We began discussing timelines and locations during quiet evenings at home. Easton became our most vocal supporter, proudly telling anyone who'd listen about how his best friend had found genuine love despite impossible odds. Dr. Marin checked in periodically, pleased to see me healthy and happy and thriving in ways she'd worried might never happen. And Hana? She faded into irrelevance, a cautionary tale about the consequences of cruelty and discrimination. Sometimes I still encountered people who looked at me with judgments, who assumed things about how I'd achieved my position, who made snide comments about omegas and alphas and inappropriate workplace relationships. But their words bounced off harmlessly now, because I knew my truth. I knew my worth. I knew exactly what I'd survived to get here, and I knew that Mitchell would stand beside me, defending me, loving me, choosing me every single day for the rest of our lives. That knowledge made me invincible.